Thank you for tuning in to From My Mat to Yours podcast, hosted by yours truly, Kenya Marsh, certified yoga instructor and yoga bestie. Last week, we dived into when you should practice your yoga at home. Today, we're going to go into how long you should practice at home. So by now, you would have already created your yoga space, which we talked all the way back in episode 1, and you figured out what time of day you should practice. Now we're going to figure out how long that practice should last. So, are you ready to get started? Let's go. Let's talk about the duration. I know leading a busy life and squeezing in something new can be a challenge. The good news is now you get to decide how long your practice lasts. There's a myth saying the longer you practice, the better. But there is exceptions to that. But in actuality, you don't need to have a long practice to feel good, especially if you don't have that time. There's sometimes you can squeeze that in when you have, an open slot in your day. But in most cases, if you're a busy working mom, you already have a lot on your plate and you have a limited space to squeeze in. That's what we're going to talk about today and how you can take advantage of that. You do not need to practice yoga for 2 hours or more unless you are attending a workshop. There are certain times where you need to dedicate to really focus and dive in to concentrated areas. But ideally, you can have an effective yoga session under an hour. And to be honest, over the last couple of years, I've seen progress with just working off a 20 to 30 minute yoga practice daily. Now, if you have a consistent yoga practice, that's going to help. If you're doing a 20-minute yoga practice once a week, you're not going to see any growth. So I want to provide some tips on how long you should practice. Long holds can benefit you. So in order to really see the benefit and get the most out of each asana or pose, that's where you want your focus to be, on your breathing and holding. Not for 2 seconds, but really holding that pose. The longer you hold the pose, the more you allow yourself and your muscles to open up. Excuse me. There's no benefit flying through your yoga pose unless you're following or you fall under the exceptions that we'll cover in a few moments. When you're doing a sequence or you've created your flow, you want to take your time before moving from one to the other. So this is where it goes back to when we discussed when to practice. If you're practicing at your peak time, you have your energy, your muscles is lubricated, you're all warmed up, you're ready to go. You will not have that room, or you have less room for injury. But if you're foggy in your mind and you're just waking up and you're trying to just move and you only got like 20 minutes, you're not going to benefit and your concentration could throw you off and that can lead to an injury. So when you're shorter in time, you want to build at least 5 to 8 poses and focus on holding each one for a minimum of 30 seconds up to a minute. That's going to be how you're going to get an effective yoga practice with having a short allotted time to work with. So let's talk the exceptions. There are some yoga styles that require you to move through without holding it for a long period of time. I know I'm trained with the Hatha yoga and it's more of a gentle approach, but we do focus on holds in that style. But there are some days, as I've mentioned last week, when I'm in my peak time during my midday yoga routine, I like doing power yoga. And with power yoga, my focus is really to work up a good sweat. So I don't focus on my long holds because I'm moving in a flow, going from one to the next. But I am aware of my alignment and my focus. See, in this style of power yoga, it's going to move you from one pose to the next. The focus here is to help you burn fat. So it's going to make you sweat and it's going to make you move. And then there's some repetition, but you're going to do a lot more poses. That's going to help you with a concentrated area. Another style like vinyasana, which is where you have a steady pace flowing to the music, you're going to move from one to the other, but you're doing a repetition of the pose, and that way, the more you do it, the more you can memorize, the more muscle memory you create. I'm going to provide you some helpful tips to take away from this as far as how long to practice. When you want to start your journey, and this is helpful, especially if you're new to yoga, you want to start off with a simple 10 to 20-minute routine, repeating some basic postures. Then you can work your way up. What I like to do is I like focusing on sun salutations, and there's 3 or 4 different variations of it, but it's a great warm-up tool. And I've mentioned this last week where in the morning, if you only have 20 minutes to work with or less, this is a great go-to sequence because it's a full body, excuse me, it's a full body movement. You're working everything and you're moving through, and it only has a few key poses that you're going to do over and over for a few rounds. This can actually make you work up a sweat, and it's very effective. So when you're pressed for time, you can just stop there and just do this for a few minutes. When you have the extra time, you can just do less rounds of that and then work on incorporating a new pose you wanted to work on. And that's how you get to work your way up. So gradually you can go from the 20-minute window to the 30-minute window. And once you're comfortable, you can move up to 45 minutes and you get the point. Another thing is holds. To get the most out of each pose, you want to hold them for about 30 seconds and then gradually work your way up to 1 minute. This is great if you want to increase your back bends and you want to achieve splits or other flexible poses. You don't want to jump into anything. You just want to hold prep poses that will eventually allow you to elevate and see progress over time, because nothing happens with yoga overnight. Some can take weeks, months, years to achieve, depending on the posture and depending on your unique body structure. Another tip to take away from this podcast is to breathe. A lot of cases, you tend to hold your breath when you're moving from one pose to the next. You don't want to do that. You want your breath to create that pathway to move through. Breathing is key. Always bring your focus back to that. Everything else will fall into place. Place. The last tip I want to provide is pace. There is no rush. It's not a competition when it comes to yoga. Rushing can lead to an injury. So you want to pace yourself and take your time as you move and flow from one posture to the other. You set the time and say you set 20 minutes. Don't focus on that time. Put a timer on so you can just listen for the beep and just allow yourself to breathe and move with that allotted time you provided yourself. That way you would be accountable. You don't have to watch the clock, and then you can go on about your day without rushing through. And therefore, you will allow yourself to get the benefit and have a nice, short, yet effective yoga practice. A bonus tip is consistency. You want to establish a steady routine and you want to commit to doing a daily practice. I know when I started with going through 3 days a week, and then I gradually went up from the 4 days to 7. Now I dial down a little bit because I have a lot more on my plate. So I squeeze in 30 minutes 3 times a week, and I dedicate an hour on one day of the weekend. So it's all about figuring out your schedule and then working with that. That's going to be all for today's podcast. Tune in next week where I will be talking more on why you should practice yoga and provide some of the benefits you would get from having a newfound practice and a steady, consistent practice. So until then, have a wonderful and productive week. If you would like, you can follow my journey on Instagram at Simply Fit and Curvy Yoga. You can also follow me on my Facebook page at Simply Fit and Curvy Yoga as well. I wish you a wonderful weekend and happy May. Thanks for listening.